The natural history of that particular type of epilepsy is that, you grow out of the epilepsy at a certain age, then those individuals could actually stop their medication.
Fellow Homo sapiens. Now, genetics is an exciting sphere when it comes to the epilepsies because it really is developing at a rapid speed. Well, this week we chat with Professor Usha Kini, a consultant, researcher and lecturer from Oxford University, who tells us about her work on the new exciting epilepsy genetics project called Genseize. For Genseize, they are recruiting individuals and families affected by a primary epilepsy who would like to potentially find out more about their own condition, which may lead to improved treatments, but also improve diagnoses and care for other people around us now and in the future.
I'm a consultant in clinical genetics and I work at the Oxford Centre for Genomic Medicine. I have a research interest in the genetics of congenital brain abnormalities, epilepsies, and neurodevelopmental disorders.
What does that involve? You're involved in much research, I believe, and you're a consultant, so you work directly with patients and with trainees in the university as well. So you do a bit of everything, is that right?
That's absolutely right, Torie. So I do a bit of everything. In my clinic, I see a lot of children usually who have been born with congenital abnormalities or who develop epilepsy quite early on in life or who are developmentally delayed and have intellectual disability. I also see adults who have neurofibromatosis, and some of those individuals also have epilepsy. So a lot of rare genetic disorders. And in the research, currently I'm very excited by the sorts of things we're doing. One of the main projects I'm involved in is something called Genseize. So the Genseize project is an NHS transformation project. It's funded by NHS England through the Central and South Genomic Medicine Service Alliance. And basically what we're trying to do through this project is to offer whole genome sequencing to all individuals who have epilepsy, primary epilepsy. So as long as they do not have an acquired cause like an infection or trauma or tumor or autoimmune or some other acquired cause. And the main aim of doing this is to kind of try and work out how much of that idiopathic epilepsy is actually genetic in origin. But the other benefits to patients who have this kind of epilepsy is that actually we can offer more accurate genetic counseling, so more accurate reproductive risks, the risks of their children having epilepsy or a similar disorder, if the epilepsy is just part of another condition, for example. Also, this is a great way of learning about the natural history of some of these rare genetic epilepsies. And then again, if you've got a group of patients who have got the same sort of rare genetic epilepsy, it kind of has implications for clinical trial readiness. Pharmaceutical companies obviously always interested in groups of patients with the same rare genetic disorder. So those are the kind of main things we're looking at. Interestingly, with this project, we're focusing not just on patients who have just complex and severe epilepsies. We are focusing on those who have well-controlled epilepsies, who are out there in the community or those being managed by their GPs, so in primary care. We also, want to target those individuals who may have had some basic genetic testing previously, but have not had the most sophisticated whole genome sequencing and so haven't reached a diagnosis yet. Of course, doing whole genome sequencing is not a promise that we will reach a diagnosis in these cases, partly because we don't know what most of our genome does at this point. And so there must be so many new genes out there which haven't yet been discovered to cause human disease. So, there's a lot of work to be done.
Pretty exciting stuff. I mean, it's really cool, actually, that you are inviting or trying to get interest from people who don't have refractory epilepsy, but indeed have controlled seizures. Because often I think those people might feel a little bit left out. It's not like the epilepsy doesn't impact their lives, actually. It really does, and can do so in a very negative way. So it's great that those people aren't forgotten. But if their epilepsy is controlled, how will that benefit the study to get information from them? What will that do?
At this point, because we only test people who have got severe and complex epilepsy, we don't really know what the spectrum is for some of these rare genetic disorders. So it will allow us to look at that from an epidemiological point of view. But also, I think, certainly, things are better now, but previously there would be lots of patients who were diagnosed with epilepsy once upon a time, were put on medication, their epilepsy is well controlled, and then they don't want to change the medication. But if we knew that the natural history of that particular type of epilepsy is that, you grow out of the epilepsy at a certain age, then those individuals could actually stop their medication. And they would feel reassured in doing so because they then know that there is scientific evidence to support that decision.
Oh gosh, that would be so lovely. I can just imagine as a patient being told, do you know what? You're fine. You wouldn't have seizures now anymore. So you don't need to take this drug. And then that positive impact that could have on the person's cognitive ability, their sort of awareness, their even things like sleeping and communicating, that could positively, depending upon the dosage that they're on, obviously, but really positively affect their lives. There are so many good things, it sounds like, that could come out of this study.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why we're kind of really focused on this. It's very much a team effort, and we've got, adult neurologists, pediatric neurologists, community pediatricians, and the GPs involved in this project.
And is it people you're getting involved, are they all from the UK? And is it patients solely from the UK?
So it's a very local project at the moment. It's a pilot that we're doing. And we hope to have, once we have got more information, we hope to be able to spread it out nationwide. Mostly in England, because whole genome sequencing isn't really available easily in Scotland and Wales just yet.
Yeah, because most people that I've spoken to, most clinicians, we've been talking largely about whole exome sequencing, so about the parts of the genome that we kind of know at the moment might be responsible for lots of different abnormalities. But the fact you're doing the whole shebang, that's a lot of data to go through.
Absolutely. Although they do whole genome sequencing, the focus is on panels of genes that are known to cause the kind of presentation of the individual. So whether it's epilepsy or intellectual disability or something else. So it's quite focused because that's the only thing that can be reportable. So if you find variants in genes that have not been previously reported to cause human disease, then even if it looks suspicious, there isn't a lot you can do in terms of helping patients or reporting it back to families.
So therefore, what is the purpose of doing whole genome sequencing instead of solely exome sequencing?
When we do exome sequencing or even whole genome sequencing at this point, more than 50% of cases still remain unsolved. We don't really get to the bottom of it. And part of it is that there are other mechanisms by which human disease is caused. One of them, of course, is, you may have a change in the non-coding bits of the genes, the intronic bits that can be picked up by whole genome sequencing. But also there can be complex rearrangements within the genome. There can be methylation abnormalities. There's just so many different things. And then there are the technical limitations of the way we do whole genome sequencing at the moment that do not allow us to reach the diagnosis. So there's lots of different extra tests we could add to what we're doing in order to reach a diagnosis for those patients. So instead of doing it as an exome and then a genome, we hope that we have a higher diagnostic rate by just going for whole genome sequencing. Also, this data could be used later on for, it can be revisited at a later date if we don't reach a diagnosis straight away.
A bit like how, this is going to sound a bit sick, but how, was it decades ago, people would take fluid samples from criminals and they couldn't test it at the time because we were not able to identify DNA. And then later on, like decades later, they're like, yeah, we know who this person is, and they get convicted. right? Is it, so that's kind of along those lines you're kind of thinking? No convictions, patients, but do you know what I mean? Is that...
Yes, I mean, obviously, resources are an important thing to consider when we are thinking about reanalysis of data, because the data is huge, as you said. We're looking at 3 billion chemicals within the genome at any point. So, there is a lot to go through.
And how many people have signed up already? And how many more people do we need?
So it isn't, because it's a transformation project and it isn't a research where you have a finite number to reach. It's basically we are trying to find more and more patients. So we've only recently started recruiting through primary care. And so, the numbers are not there for the primary care patients, but certainly from tertiary care, because even when you think about patients attending adult neurology clinics for epilepsy, they don't automatically get whole genome sequencing or any kind of genetic testing, unlike pediatric patients who can more readily access those. So I think, we don't have the numbers yet. The project is relatively new. It's in its infancy, if you like. So we're waiting. I think in a few months' time, we should have some figures to report.
Brilliant. And so if anybody is interested, well, first of all, if we have clinicians or say GPs or people of other sort of professions interested, first of all, how should they get in contact, or if they want to find out more and potentially refer patients?
We're going to have our website, which isn't yet up and running, and it will be on the Health Education England website. So hopefully, people can contact us through the website.
And would it be the same for patients to get in touch if they're interested, or families?
Absolutely, yeah.
One more thing about this, lots of people get really nervous about security of data, and they're worried you've got my whole genome, it's going to be a bit like, I don't know, Terminator or something in the future. How can you reassure people that their data is secure?
So this is done at a national level. And these things have been taken care of, obviously, if it's being offered at a national level. I mean, it's within England, as you know. But there are strong security measures being used to maintain the confidentiality. And patients are consented properly for this testing. We prefer to have samples from the affected individual as well as their parents. So a trio. Because it then helps us to filter out things that are not relevant. Absolutely not to worry. We can reassure you that this has been managed really well.
Thank you so much to Usha for telling us about the exciting Genseize project, which could contribute to improving and even saving the lives of millions of people. To learn more about Usha, make sure that you do check her out at torierobinson.com/epilepsy-sparks-insights, where you can find out more about her and links to her work. You can also find out more about the Genseize project, which has been added to the Epilepsy Sparks website at epilepsysparks.com/research-involvement. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends, family and colleagues, anybody interested in the human brain, to be honest, because it really helps us to get our messages about the epilepsies out to the masses.